Honourable Member for St James North.
Thank you, Chair. I rise to intervene on Head 28 under the Ministry of Home Affairs, which speaks towards a supplemental in areas such as the Department of Emergency Management, the National Council for Substance Abuse, the firefighting services, and the corrective and rehabilitative services, which would include the probation department and the girls and boys industrial schools. Of course, we are into the midst of the hurricane season. We pray every day that not only our beautiful island survives any disaster, tropical storm, hurricane, but our fellow sister Caribbean countries as well, because we are all affected in that event. But we have to prepare for any eventuality. Of course, I don't know who could really withstand a Category 5 hurricane, but certainly below that, we have to try and get our shelters as fit for purpose as we can. We have to ensure that the most vulnerable in our society, those who are old, persons living by themselves, especially those with disabilities, that we know them. We know everyone within our constituency who may be very vulnerable, and seek to move them to safe place of abode during an impending bad weather, whether it's with other relatives, whether it is, in a shelter. They're Category 1, Category 2 shelters, of course. Category 1, you go in before the event. Category 2, in case of the event and you suffer the disruption of life, you can go in there. Most of the shelters are schools, or at least there are more schools than any other. Some are churches. This government has decided to place storage bins in every parish, which will contain emergency equipment, food, materials that may be necessary in the event that some part of Barbados may be cut off from the rest, and access after any disaster may be difficult. And that is a superb initiative for which I commend the government and the cabinet, of which I am a member for. Again, arising from our manifesto with which we went to the people a couple months ago. In terms of substance abuse, of course, this is a prevalent problem in our country, and we look to minimize that as much as possible. And the National Council of Substance Abuse, of course, is a government agency that seeks to deal with abuse of illegal drugs, and therefore any monies put into such, or any subsidy put into such an agency, has to be well spent. There's a drug treatment court that we have as well, with funding from one of the foreign-based trust agencies here that do tremendous work, the Maria Holder Trust, and to that we are grateful. We also have here a supplementary chair for the firefighting services, and of course just 2 evenings ago the fire service would have been enhanced by 20 new recruits. We are looking to see how we can incorporate the protective services of our country, fire, police, prisons, immigration and customs, into a protective services commission, removing them from the public service commission, Well, right now, of course, the police have a separate services commission, and this, in fact, is a recommendation of the Constitutional Commission of 1998 when it gave its report. That commission, of course, was headed by, and he was then as well as he is now, legal luminary Sir Henry Ford, Queen's Counsel, who, of course, is one of the 3 longest serving members of this Parliament, and who the Honourable Member for Christchurch West sits and does justice to his seat as his successor in this Parliament. And we're looking to see how we can enhance those services, make it easier in terms of recruitment, in terms of promotion, appointment, in terms of response at government level to their needs, and obviously in turn their response to the needs of the public in the service and protection and security of our country. Under the corrective and rehabilitative services, of course, we have the prisons, which I've spoken about, in line with FIRE, in making it more relevant to the needs of the 21st century. And a large part, of course, of the prison service has to be rehabilitation of prisoners, because not only in Barbados but throughout the Western world an issue prevails in recidivism, and you really want to train individuals and give them skills, life skills, technical skills, academic skills, that when they come out of the corrective services, that they are able to return to the world a rehabilitated person and can, do well in society. One of the problems that we confront in today's Barbados is the fact that young men, in some cases not even adults, are getting into confrontations with the criminal justice system. Young men between ages, 16, 25, and that is something that clearly this government intends to confront, and that is why we have, for example, the block program, which the Honourable Minister of Youth, I believe I'm correct in saying, is dealing with today, for instance. That is why we have buttressed education again in terms of restoring state-funded tuition fees at the University of the West Indies, at the Barbados Community College. All of these are aspects which we have to do to help minimize the amount of Barbadians on the whole, but especially young persons who might be colliding with the criminal justice system and might therefore have a need, in accordance with the rule of law, to spend time at the prisons. There's the Girls and Boys Industrial School as well, and Chair, I visited basically all of these departments in the less than 2 months I've had the honor to be Minister of Home Affairs, all except, I believe, the probation department, which I'm set to visit on Monday, having had to postpone that visit because of an emergency which I couldn't get out of at ministerial level. But certainly what really made me emotional is visiting the Girls and Boys Industrial School, and to see 14, 15-year-olds institutionalized, in some cases for breach of misdemeanors such as wandering, which predated our independence. And we plan, because the last government had on the table a juvenile justice bill, which they had no excuse for not bringing to Parliament before Parliament dissolved on them, almost without them recognizing it was going to dissolve in March last year. Because they had a conference in 2015, and for 3 years were gathering information from all the stakeholders to reform the system for rehabilitation of young persons, minors. And I could only blame the last Attorney General and Minister of Home Affairs for the failure to bring that bill to Parliament and to let's move to a more modern day juvenile justice reform system. And certainly it is this Cabinet's intention to review that bill. We would bring that paper to Cabinet and give the Cabinet of Barbados an opportunity to look at that and to see whether we should bring that bill as it is to Parliament or make some changes to it. That's basically the areas under this head, ma'am, and I'm obliged to you. Oh, I move that that head 28 stand par.
Question is that head 28 stand par. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All honourable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Head 32, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade.
Honourable members for St James South.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank you for the opportunity to share about the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. In our ministry, there are some critical matters that we have to undertake to be able to assist the country and to assist our fellow ministries in being able to achieve the objectives which we have. Barbados at this point is undergoing severe economic strain. And for us to get through this period, it is going to require that Barbados has very strong leadership to come up with plans that helps us to get forward. But then, having made the plans, it is absolutely necessary that we're able to mobilize resources, mobilize cooperation, and create the opportunities through which we'll be able to exercise our economic activities. And I say this because sometimes it's not always appreciated, the role that Foreign Affairs does. People tend to think of us in terms of visas and passports and diplomatic stuff and diplomatic speak. However, every single ministry requires us to work assiduously to be able to create opportunities for economic activity, so that our dialogues with our various partners in the embassies or the countries that we have alliances with, one of the things that we seek to do is to be able to identify what are some of the opportunities that we can pursue in order to create economic growth and economic development. For example, in terms of, we have an energy sector. We are looking at the necessity for being able to get further exploration, for example, in our oil or potential oil resources offshore. But how are we going to make sure that Barbadians participate in that particular activity so that Barbados can actually grow from out of it? And so we, during our dialogues today with one of our allies, we were able to put to them that one of the things we needed was to have scholarships, for example, for Barbadians to be able to learn how to do deep-sea exploration and mining. Therefore, for that industry, that sector to take off, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade has to plow the field that will enable us to be able to pursue what needs to be pursued. And so what we're doing to assist with this very critical period that we are going through here in Barbados, we want to be able to galvanize and put energy behind trade. And in order to do that, one of the things that we have to be able to do is to be able to investigate, for example, what are some of the blockages that have been preventing our people from trading, from taking advantage of the partnership agreements? What are some of the things that prevent foreign businesses from being able to make use of the double taxation agreements so that we can get more business coming through our financial services? And so part of the work that we have to do is going to require us to be able to make sure our missions are properly staffed, that those missions have staff that understand the areas in which they have to work, and that we set out a plan and a strategy that allows them to work assiduously to be able to get out there and begin to identify the opportunities that will help to strengthen all of our ministries in their very important work. But what I want to particularly alert the Barbadian public to, I'm not going to be very long on this, but it is to help us to understand and appreciate what each of us needs to do in order to be able to get through the situation that we're in. It is absolutely critical that we are able to mobilize our enterprises, because with the best will in the world, while a government may put initiatives on the ground, unless our enterprises get up and get out there and trade, we actually will do nothing. And that is why our partnership with the Ministry of Commerce is going to be extremely important, to be able to empower enterprises, to be able to build the strength, to be able to build capacity, to begin to export. I've said it over and over again, and I will say it constantly because I want Barbadians to understand. We cannot and will not create proper economic growth if our enterprises only sell to 280,000 people. The only way that they can make more money is by charging every citizen more for the same product or service that they offered last year. And what that does, it diminishes the quality of life of the citizen. The citizen is getting worse off in order for enterprises to grow if they do not export, ma'am. And therefore, part of the strategy that will be center to what we're going to be doing in foreign trade, and I know that this is already on the agenda for the Minister of Commerce, is that we are going to be working assiduously to get our small businesses, our medium-sized businesses to recognize the importance of going into export. The provisions that we're making in relation to trust funds, which no doubt the Minister of Commerce will speak to, must have at its heart the view, the direction that we're going to move into other parts of the world and sell our goods and services. And in order for us to do that effectively, we must build an educational system and program that builds people with a confidence to be able to move beyond our shores to sell. People who have a belief in their creativity and their innovativeness and believe that they can compete with people across the world. That as we in foreign trade go out and find the opportunities, that a strong, vibrant, progressive, ambitious people walk behind us and take hold of those opportunities and turn them into genuine economic growth. And I want to close on these remarks, ma'am. We know it is difficult, what we're going through, and we know people are suffering. In St. James South, I see it every day. And ma'am, it is not limited to our working class communities. The suffering is felt across all layers of this society, and we've had 10 years of genuine suffering. But what we have before us today, in the entire supplementary that we're dealing with today, ma'am, is our effort, our determined effort to break out of the terrible place that we have been placed in and to create space for Barbadians to hope for a better tomorrow. All we're asking is that they stay with us. All we're asking is that they understand what we're seeking to do and that they recognize that while they had 10 years of darkness, that we have in front of us a plan that we're hoping within the next 2 to 3 years we are going to see tremendous growth in the Barbadian economy. And all I ask of them is to partner with us, be patient as we walk, and for every Barbadian to do everything in their power to help this little country get back to where it belongs. I'm obliged to you, ma'am. I beg that 32 stand part.
Question is that head 32 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. All honourable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions.
Honourable member for St James North.
Thank you, Chairman. I rise to speak on Head 29, the Office of Director of Public Prosecutions. Of course, an extremely important office, constitutionally protected, and fundamental in terms of the administration of justice of our country. We have been going through some trying times, especially recently in terms of the administration of justice, the delays in the justice system, both in, well, this is in terms of criminal justice, but also in terms of civil, and any monies being voted to buttress the administration of justice has to be fundamental to the daily lives of our citizens and of our constituents. We need to, of course, find a way, and the Honourable Prime Minister has said and has certainly directed that that we're going to start on a fresh slate from June this year in terms of trying to move forward criminal matters, that when an accused is charged, that his case should be heard and completed within 6 to 9 months hereafter, starting from now, and that we will deal with the backlog of cases in terms of getting 3 more judges, which I will speak to under the following head, the Ministry of the Attorney General. But the administration of justice is something that this government is extremely concerned about, and one in which we intend to address, because, of course, while we deal with the economy in terms of confronting the distressing state of the economy which we found on May the 25th and the high burdensome debt to the GDP ratio, we also have to deal with aspects that affect the daily lives of our citizens, and the administration of justice is certainly one of those aspects. I beg to move, Chair, that Head 29 stand par.
The question is that Head 29 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All honourable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Head 30, Ministry of Attorney General.
Honourable member for St James North.
Chair, I rise to speak under this head, under the Ministry of the Attorney General, and in the unavoidable absence of the Attorney General, I don't unavoidable. Who is where I should have been? Who is where I should have been today? oh, the attorney. What the hell? Sorry. They'll come back. The Attorney General normally sitting down here. I didn't know he was back. Oh. Sorry, dear. I didn't know he was sorry. But I didn't know the Attorney General was here. He's given me permission to move on. Under this head, we all know that the Supreme Court, which has only been in existence, a relatively new Supreme Court building in White Park Road, has been under tremendous strain in terms of the failure to maintain that building for the decade or so that it has been in existence. And this is really something that this government is certainly aware of, and that is why we have created a Ministry of Maintenance, headed by the Honourable Member for Christchurch West, and with him the Honourable Member for St. Lucie, Ministry of Transport, Works and Maintenance, to look after maintenance of government buildings. Because we can't continue to build new buildings for the government and that in a few years' time they are in tremendous need of maintenance, environmental problems, workers getting sick, and essentially putting the daily lives of our people again at tremendous disadvantage. So you have a situation which my colleague, the Honourable Member for St. Joseph, is tackling head on in terms of now having to find alternative accommodation for the functioning of the various courts. And we have voted $2.5 million to fix the building in White Park Road. But clearly this government is absolutely mindful of the fact that we as a government have to maintain our buildings and have to vote monies in every year's estimates to maintain government buildings. Also, Chair, I would wish to speak on the additional judges, three additional judges, which again were voted on during the mini budget and for which monies would be dealt with here as well. I believe 2 will serve in the criminal court and 1 in family or civil court. But again, all of this to strengthen the administration of justice under the Ministry of the Attorney General. I beg to move. No. Sorry. You do it? Okay. I'm obliged. Still move it? Right. Yeah. I beg to move, Chair, that head 30 under the Ministry of the Attorney General, Stamp Park.